at one point during this game, I thought to myself, I'm like, why am I so angry if this is the outcome I wanted?
The playoff field is set. The lottery odds are set. We have much to discuss. And here to break it all down with me is one Daniel LaRue, and we watched today's basketball, and I was left with such a weird feeling by these last two games of the season for all these teams. I didn't know what was going on or what anyone was thinking or why they were doing the things they're doing. It was just a really odd last two games of the season.
It was confounding, it was frustrating, and surprising in certain circumstances because I think a lot of the story of Sunday, and to a lesser extent Friday, was the decisions that these teams made in terms of who played and who didn't. And I think I'm open to starting at other places. The thing that was most stunning to me from that, and I think is maybe most reflective of the bizarre nature of the last couple days in the NBA, is Nuggets Spurs. Because Nuggets Spurs had, I would say, clearer incentives than some of the other things, which maybe to some degree were murky. And so
apparently it wasn't clear.
It's
clear to us.
Here's what's interesting. So we'll do the Denver part of this first, even though I think the San Antonio component is more straightforward and bizarre. So the Denver Nuggets, we could assume, and as actually happened, that the Los Angeles Lakers were going to beat the Utah Jazz, who really, really, really wanted to lose and are very good at that, other than against the Grizzlies. And so you assume the Lakers are going to win. So then the Nuggets, the dichotomy of the outcomes is that if the Nuggets win, they are the 3 seed, face Minnesota in the first round, and then are on the same side of the bracket as the Spurs, not the same side of the bracket as the Thunder. If the Nuggets lose, then they are the 4. They face the Houston Rockets and are on OKC's side of the bracket. So from Denver's standpoint, as you and I saw it, it is a choice to try to beat the 3 seed and go for it. Denver decidedly did not do that. Jokic played 18 minutes, enough to satisfy the requirements to be eligible for awards. He did not play in the second half. All the rest of their principles were out. And some of that is justifiable via the injuries that they're currently dealing with or have previously dealt with. Spencer Jones, Peyton Watson, and then Aaron Gordon's been dealing with so many hamstring issues this year. So that part of it kind of makes sense. The San Antonio part of this is why I said it's so confounding, because maybe Denver didn't want to play the Wolves. Maybe they didn't want to do something. Maybe there was
we talked about it Friday. I think that's defensible. If you just feel like, hey, we've had some really rough series to the Wolves. We lost them in a playoff series where we would just feel better about avoiding them. Like, great. Like, I completely understand that. And hey, if you're close on one or the other, like you're feeling like, hey, we avoid the Wolves. We're on OKC's side of the bracket. We got to beat both OKC and San Antonio. Maybe it's even easier to beat OKC when we're fresh after a pretty easy first round series if we're on that side of the bracket, as opposed to having to beat OKC after we went through a war with Minnesota and then another war with San Antonio. Like, I think that's defensible. I disagree with that. That's not how I would have played it, but I think that makes total sense. But then here's the other thing, Danny. Like, if you really believe that that's the right path, then why didn't they tank these 2 games harder and lose? Like, okay, I mean, they could have easily lost to San Antonio. Like, the OKC, maybe not, but because they really rusted everyone too. But yeah, I don't understand why they would have not just like made sure that they lost to San Antonio. Like, it's not that hard. Like, to ask Tyronn Lue for some tips if you need it.
Yeah, or any of these teams, because the Nuggets have players on the roster who are not as good at helping them win as some of the players that they play. And I mean, Julian Strawther isn't going to score 25 points in 34 minutes every night. He had a big first quarter in particular. But so Denver, if they had wanted to lose, they could have lost, and they didn't. But San Antonio, to me, is the more hard to explain part of this, because their incentives were clear as day. The San Antonio Spurs, if they won this game, they moved Denver to the other side of the bracket and replaced them with the Los Angeles Lakers, who are missing 2 of their 3 best players. And maybe if they won the series, Luka would be able to come back. So really the only way for San Antonio that you would say you'd rather have it is if the team that you feared the most was the Wolves, who you can't get out of your bracket, and that you wanted the team that could knock them off. So like, let's say you thought the Lakers couldn't, but maybe the Nuggets could. That is a very, very specious logic to me. And so what San Antonio did, they played most of their guys, but Victor Wembanyama scored 40 points in 26 minutes on Friday. Did not play on Sunday. He's always eligible for awards. They could have flipped that.
Yeah. Well, he played in like a pretty bullshit game that they would have won anyway on Friday.
Exactly.
Right?
And then instead, they not only didn't play Wembanyama, they also didn't play Luke Cornett. And Luke Cornett, they called it shoulder soreness, and maybe it's gotten worse, but Luke Cornett hadn't missed a game in a few weeks. He missed one game in early April, and then he's been starting in Wembanyama's stead. He played 18 minutes on Friday when Wembanyama started and played. So it doesn't appear to be anything wrong. If they had played Luke Cornett in this game, they probably would have won, because instead they're playing Mason Plumlee. They played a lot of Carter Bryant at center, which, I mean, that can work. We've seen them do that even when they had other options available. But it was surreal to see the Spurs just not put the pedal to the metal. It's like you looked a gift horse in the mouth. You could get the Denver Nuggets out of your bracket, put the Lakers in, and they just went, nah, we're good. I think that is the much harder decision to defend when you consider that the marginal choice was one, maybe two players, and pushing a little bit harder for it, because Denver definitely seemed ambivalent towards winning, even if they didn't play their absolute tankiest guys.
Yeah, it definitely was kind of odd. And maybe they just felt like, I mean, the Orlando Magic, we'll get to them in a second. So they're just like, well, with who's on the other side, we should just win. And no, these are actually NBA players. And by the way, you have like a slightly under neutral net rating on the season with Victor Wembanyama off the floor, even though they had a nice run without him in the NBA Cup and leading up to them. So maybe the feeling was it was just really important for Victor to get some rest and Luke Cornett to get some rest. And like, these guys' injuries are worse than we thought. But then why did Victor play on Friday when all that mattered was just getting, they didn't want to maybe they didn't want to give the Nuggets something to see in the second round, but then they wouldn't have to play them in the second round if they just beat them. Right exactly. Now, they would only one game. You'd only have to play one of Denver and OKC, and so and just had a very especially when you consider how easy the first round matchup would have been too. Now, the second round matchup the first round matchup would have been Phoenix regardless. So yeah, I mean, maybe they're worried that the Lakers would win and Luka would come back, and that would be too hard of a matchup. But yeah, because you remember a couple of years ago, Tom Thibodeau was the coach of the Knicks, and we kind of criticized them for going really hard, winning their final game, and then matching up with Philly, because Philly looked pretty scary. Embiid was coming back. We didn't know that Embiid wasn't going to quite be the same. And the Knicks ended up winning that series, although that outcome could have very easily been different. It was a classic series, even though it ended up going 6. There were 3 totally crazy games in that series. But at least it makes sense what he's doing. It's all right, hey, we value competitiveness on this team. We've been going for it all season. That's what we do. I don't want to rest guys. I want to keep them in shape. We have a whole week off after this. And let's go and try and win this, because that's what we do. We are going to try to compete at all times. That to me makes more sense than what some of these teams did, where it was just not having your cake and not getting to eat it. It was just the weirdest. It's well, I guess we'll just play some guys. So it must be if you're the Spurs, Stephon Castle had a knee injury. Why is he playing then if it's so important to get some rest for these guys? And Victor, he was kind of grimacing through that rib thing. So he was only out there just to make all NBA, but they just wanted him to mess around in that game that didn't matter and not potentially get hurt more against the Nuggets. I just really don't understand. But we're going to be remembering this one right up there with that one I was talking about on Thursday, where the Blazers tried to lose or won anyway, and then actually benefited from winning. This could end up being quite the opposite. But I mean, I think as fans we're going to win though, because we're much more likely to get Wemby versus Jokic, which was the second round matchup that I wanted much more actually than OKC Denver.
Agreed. And so I at one point during this game, I thought to myself, I'm like, why am I so angry if this is the outcome I wanted? And it's because I'm a very process oriented person and I didn't like the process that led to it. Also worth noting, Dylan Harper did leave this contest. It's a reminder of the risks of this. Dylan Harper left the game with a thumb injury. Hopefully he's okay. We haven't gotten anything definitive from that. But one of the other components of it, and we'll talk about this for a couple of the other decisions that's so hard, is that yes, there are risks. You could have a sprained ankle or something that could carry in. Is that these series for a lot of the teams that made unusual decisions doesn't start for at least a week or
Yeah.
roughly a week. And so
Yeah,
it's not
I
a
would totally
circumstance.
understand it. If it was the old thing where it was like guys are banged up in the whole old season, the season ends on Wednesday and the playoffs start on Saturday, sure. All right, that would make these decisions much more defensible to me.
And instead, yeah, it's going to be a long time until the San Antonio Spurs play again, and they could have given themselves an easier bracket. They instead gave themselves a harder bracket, and they had these weird things where the Nuggets. It was probably surprising that they went up so big in the third quarter, and that and I mean, it was an early warning sign when they dominated the non-Jokic minutes in the first half. You're like, okay, they're doing that, and then Jokic doesn't play in the second half, and they're still doing it. The Spurs fought a little bit for a comeback, and one of the other stories of Sunday's games is that the players who are on the floor are always going to play hard. We're not that the Mark Batson style tank happens extremely rarely. The players on the court are trying to do something that
Yeah,
is not
well, the coaches have really gotten in on it the last couple of years when they really are trying to lose. But yeah, I think no coach of a winning team has had the balls to do what Ty Lue did in 2021 with like the Arturo 5 of 21 from the field post ups on
right.
every possession game.
And so generally you have to assume that the players that you're going to play are going to play hard. And so you see circumstances like I think Memphis is the key of this of play unwinnable lineups. And if that's what you're trying to do, if your goal is to lose the game, you can do it, even if you're a team that's trying. But we haven't seen that as much from these competitive teams. They don't have the experience or anything else like that. And San Antonio, neither of these teams should have been trying to lose. So that whole conversation, unless Denver really truly did want to be the 4, in which case they could have made it happen and did not. So a bizarre result, a capper on what was a strange day. Do you want to walk through because that was really the only game that was both had consequences for both sides and was really consequential in the West. We could just run through the West before we do the East.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we should. And there's some news around those teams as well. So Oklahoma City, they lost their last game 64-18 is where they end up. They rested everyone again, lost their last two. San Antonio finishes up at 62-20 after their loss today. The Nuggets didn't have any of the tiebreakers, but they finished in the third seed, 54-28. Also, by the way, losing us the over-under, which we didn't deserve to win anyway, frankly. The Nuggets close the season on a 12-game winning streak and also lead the NBA in points per game, 122.1. Then number 4, the Lakers, they did it. They, against many odds, won their last 3 games. LeBron James really pushed through to beat who did they play? Yeah, they beat the Suns. I mean, they didn't, none of the teams that they played were technically trying, but they could have easily lost those games without much in the way of star power other than LeBron. But the Lakers, 53-29, they end up going well over, and they are the third seed outright. We didn't actually even have any tiebreakers. The Rockets, they ultimately, did Houston win today? They must have, right? Yeah, they beat Memphis.
Yeah, they beat
played
Memphis.
Memphis. They
played Memphis. They beat
they
Memphis,
did win. So, but Houston, they lost that game at home to Minnesota. As it turned out, they would have been the 5 seed even had they won that game because the Lakers had the tiebreaker over them. So Rockets 5, Lakers, Rockets in the 4-5. Lakers have home court, and that's big. If Luka or Reeves could make a miracle comeback somehow from their grade 2 muscle injuries, maybe the Lakers steal one of their first two at home, and one of them could come back for like game 4 or game 5. Again, I'm not counting on that, but at least the Lakers are giving themselves like a slight fighting chance. But overall, certainly the Thunder are the big winners here, because it was looking like the Nuggets wanted to play them. Well, the Thunder out-tanked the Nuggets in that first game between them. And then, of course, the Nuggets beat the Spurs as well. So the Thunder, they're going to get, who knows who they'll get. And it'll be one of, I guess it could be any of the teams, technically, that they could get in the first round. But I don't think Phoenix, Portland, LA, or Golden State are scaring them. And then they go into either against a Lakers team that is not going to be at full strength, you'd think almost certainly, or Houston, who I think they can handle pretty darn easily. I don't think Houston is any possibility of scoring them. So Oklahoma City, on paper, the games are not played on paper, but still on paper, should have a complete waltz to the West Finals, while the Spurs and Nuggets are, or maybe it's the Wolves, are beating the crap out of each other. And the Nuggets, I mean, they're just, the Nuggets literally got themselves the hardest possible path that they could have. They're facing, to me, at least for them, certainly, they would have to beat the 3 hardest teams for them to play in the Wolves, Spurs, and Thunder. That's just going to be really tough.
Yeah. And they could have avoided 2 of those 3. They could have played exactly one of them if they had lost this game. It's
Phoenix,
incredible.
Yeah. Phoenix finishes 45-37. They actually were only 5-5 in their last 10. They kind of, once it was clear they were the 7, they took their foot off the gas a little bit. And then Portland and the Clippers both finished 42-40. Clippers beat Golden State today, only by 5, but Kawhi did not play. He sat out with an ankle sprain. Clippers just assumed, basically. That was another one where the Clippers could have actually become the 8th seed, but they just assumed there was no chance that Sacramento was going to beat Portland. And Portland did win, but it was by 12. That had some moments where it actually got semi-interesting down the end, although Portland did lead by 20 at halftime. So, I mean, right decision there probably for the Clippers, but especially because then it's much more defensible when you're playing on Tuesday. So, or sorry, they're actually playing on Wednesday. So you could say, yeah, Kawhi did really need the rest. He pushed hard down the end. So they finished tied at 42-40, but the Blazers, they beat the Clippers head-to-head twice in the last couple of weeks. That's how they got themselves. The 8th seed is looking like that was going to be the Clippers for a while. And then Golden State, 37-45. Steph Curry did play in that last game. He was going to try to just ramp up his minutes a little bit. He did end up playing 29 minutes and had 24 points and was plus 13 in the game they lost by 5, of course. So Clippers did play the rest of their players other than Kawhi in this one. All right, anything else to talk about here in the Western Conference, or should we move to the East?
Well, we could. Do you want to do news for the West teams?
Oh yeah, great idea.
A couple of pieces of news that are significant. Al Horford started and played 19 minutes in the eventual loss to the Clippers. So the Warriors started, other than Draymond Green, they started, it was lower back injury management for Draymond. They started a lot of guys who'd be in their potential starting 5 in the shorthanded versions of Steph Curry, D'Anthony Melton, Brandon Podziemski, Porzingis, and Horford played together. And so that's a positive for the Warriors, considering they now play on Wednesday. They play at the Clippers, and so we can see. So it's going to be interesting to see. I don't think the Warriors are just going to stay in LA, but that is their next game, playing the same team in the same arena that they just did.
Yeah, not till Wednesday, however. Then what else we got for news on those teams?
Jackson Hayes missed the Lakers' win over the Jazz with left foot injury management. That's something to monitor. The Lakers don't play again until next weekend, but that is still something to keep an eye on because they wanted to win their game. They're playing the Jazz, and everybody beats the Jazz, but that's still significant. Unfortunately, Cooper Flagg, for the only East-West game of the day, they played the Chicago Bulls. Cooper Flagg sprained his ankle. The Maverick season is done, but hope that hope it's not severe or anything like that. Hopefully we'll get an idea of, he'll have a healthy offseason. Still going to be a long gap for Flagg between now and when the Mavericks play their next game that counts. But you want to see a strong close to the season, so hope he's okay.
All right, we'll get to the rest of the Western tankers momentarily. Portland, Matisse Thybulle and Vic Krejci both played. Remember, Matisse Thybulle had what appeared to be an ankle injury on Friday, but he did play in this one. Vic Krejci was active as well. Jeremy Grant, according to Tiago Splitter, is doing things on the court, but no return is slated for that 7-8 game on Tuesday as of yet, it would seem. And did you mention Haywood Highsmith came back?
I did not. So Highsmith came back, and then Jordan Goodwin and Jalen Green, they've both been nursing injuries. We've talked about how the Suns have been playing it a little bit cautious with their players, and Highsmith played 10 minutes in their win over the limited Thunder. But we'll see. And I mean, with these teams, because they're playing again so soon, I fully support them, and the Suns had nothing to play for. I fully support them being cautious. So hopefully they were just with Green and Goodwin, those guys will just be ready to go on Tuesday.
Yeah, if you have nothing to play for, I very much support sitting, although something to play for could also be potentially determining your playoff matchup. All right, can we move to the East here?
Absolutely. And the game of the day, for many reasons, ended up being Celtics Magic. And it was really one of the only competitive games of the day. And it was something that you in particular, but both of us circled when we were walking through what could happen on Sunday, because the Celtics sat their main players as expected. White, Tatum, Brown, Kata all did not participate in this game. Sam Hauser didn't play either. Peyton Pritchard didn't play. And Hugo Gonzalez didn't play, concerningly due to a bone bruise. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. But the starting lineup of Max Shulga, Baylor Shireman, Jordan Walsh, Ron Harper Jr., and Luka Garza, we knew they would fight. We knew that Joe Mazzulla would want to do it, even though the Celtics had very little, we'll get into the little bit of incentive that they had in this game to win it, to push hard. And they beat the Magic playing all of their guys. Not all of them played full minutes, and we'll get into that too. But the Celtics were able to pull out this win.
Yeah, and the Magic, they did have something at stake. The most likely outcome was going to be that if the Magic had won, they would have been the 7 seed, and by losing, they would become the 8th seed. They would have played Philly very likely regardless. I mean, all these other games were pretty much fait accompli based on who was actually available. Although I think maybe one team was kind of just counting on the Magic to win, seeing the injury report, and they didn't bother either. We'll get to that. So, yeah, Orlando, Desmond Bane, congratulations to him. He's going to make all 82. He just played his first stint 6 minutes, and then they took him out, and they were feeling like pretty good. You know, they're up by 8-10 most of the first half into the third quarter. And then the Boston Celtics went absolutely batshit crazy. 42 points in the third. Baylor Shireman hitting crazy step-backs. Ron Harper Jr. was awesome. Then he actually had to go out with cramps. That's part of how it was that the Magic were eventually able to make their comeback. And all of a sudden, that quarter starts out Magic up by 9. It ends with the Celtics up by 13. And all of a sudden, Jamal Mosley is like, what the hell just hit me here? And so he, right at the start of the fourth quarter, he goes back to Desmond Bane, who hadn't played since the 6-minute mark of the first quarter. Like, oh shit, I guess like we better play now. We are just going to roll the balls out and beat these guys. So I guess, I mean, how they thought that, given, and I would still say that Bane, especially with Franz Wagner back and Anthony Black back, is probably their most indispensable player, if not necessarily their best player. And so taking him out, they couldn't hit any shots from the outside. Boston was D'ing him up. And so they bring Bane back, finally go on a big run, and they're still down by 9, 108-99. They had gotten it at one point back within 6, 101-95. Then Doris Burke was all over this on the broadcast. Bane misses a layup, going for the and one. He's crying to the refs. Everyone else is distracted. And Boston comes down. It was not even the fastest of fast breaks and just lobs a pass to Luka Garza, who's just standing by himself under the basket for a layup. And it mostly gets a timeout. And Doris Burke is like, dude, like you're playing for home court in the 7-8 game. Like, what are you doing here? Like, you're just getting run off the floor by the Celtics. But eventually they came back and actually tied it on an amazing shot by Jalen Suggs down 3. Boston just didn't score for about a 3-minute period. And Jalen Suggs came down in transition with 35 seconds left, pulls the 2-for-1, and drains it to tie the game. Joe Mazzulla had already used a timeout on a challenge, and that I thought actually should have gotten granted, and it just wasn't. And so he takes his last timeout to get a 2-for-1, which I thought was pretty interesting with 35 seconds left. The Celtics throw the ball into Luka Garza on the left wing. Wendell Carter Jr. is all over them. The Magic are trying to deny the ball in bounds. And so Luka Garza, maybe he felt some contact or something. He just turned over his right shoulder and just fucking railed a 3 from the left wing. It was a ridiculous shot going for the 2-for-1. It was the ultimate like YOLO Mazzulla shot of, hey, you know what? Like, we have ultimate confidence. This is a 2-for-1. We're going to get it in a tie game. Just get a shot up. I trust the math. We're just so unapologetic about that. I don't care what the shot is. Luka Garza, I'm going to give you all the confidence in the world to shoot this shot. And he just nailed it. It was a ridiculous shot. You're like, God, what is he doing? It's just like, no, he's just going to actually make this shot. And then Suggs came back. Magic.
I mean, I think they were shell shocked kind of at that point. It was such a surreal sequence. And I mean, I'll tell you this, like I had a child napping next to the room that I was watching in. It took everything I had to not yell in that moment. It was one of the most surprising shots. Just the aggression on it. I mean, and we know Joe Mazzulla loves a 2-for-1. But so then the Magic, and it's like, oh great, the team that needs to score a 3 in a must-win situation is the Orlando Magic. The team that is, even if they've been a little bit better this year, that is a notoriously bad shooting team. And that bore out a fair amount.
Yeah. Well, Suggs got a pretty good look, but he was not
the second
able
one.
To
yeah.
knock it down. Yeah. After Franz Wagner was not very close on a quick inbound 3. Wagner also may have retweeted. I think it looked like his ankle that it has been bothering him early in the game. I thought it was also interesting that when they put Anthony Black in as a defensive replacement, and they put him in for Wagner rather than Paolo Banchero, or even rather than Carter is a pretty good defensive player. But that was kind of odd to me that, I mean, maybe that's just because Wagner was hurting and limited. But in any event, yeah, the Magic missed that shot, another defensive rebound, and that was it, basically. So let's just go through like what all this stuff was in the East, right? Like Orlando, we already talked about, like the fact that they just didn't play Bane his usual minutes. Again, like perhaps he's just like really hurting and tired. They just wanted to get him the 82 games, but ironically, by losing there, the game is going to be on Wednesday instead of Tuesday if they're playing on the road because Philly,
there's a Flyers game.
There's a Flyers game on Tuesday. Normally the 7-8 would be on Tuesday, but now they moved it to Wednesday. So, but obviously the Magic would have rather played that game at home. And so then Atlanta also was in an interesting circumstance because all they had to do, they could have guaranteed themselves the 5 seed if they had beaten Miami. And Miami had some motivation to win because they wanted to host the 9-10 game if Charlotte had lost to the Knicks. Charlotte ended up winning that game. However, so they could have won that game, or they just assumed that because there was going to be a 3-way tie, that they would have just, if it was a 3-way tie, it would have gone to the division winner. However, because it ended up being a 2-way tie with the Magic falling out of that, the Raptors then had the tiebreaker of the Hawks, and now the Raptors are 5 and the Hawks are 6. So the Raptors will be playing Cleveland And the Hawks, we were thinking it was going to be Cleveland and the Hawks for a long time. The Hawks are going to end up in 6 and playing the Knicks, and then they would get if they beat the Knicks, obviously they'd get Boston in the second round. So, how do you feel about that for the Hawks? Should they have been trying harder to ensure themselves the 5 seed? Again, there's no scenario in which the Hawks could have fallen down to 7 here, so they're going to have at least 6 days off, regardless of what happens here.
I'm a little torn. So I think in a team in the Hawks situation, you're thinking about the first round, not the second round, because I would rather play the Pistons than the Celtics. So if you're looking at a 2-round view, then to me that's a big enough difference that I would do it. But playing the Knicks versus playing the Cavs for the Hawks, I think that it's at least defensible to say that you think you'd have a better shot against the Knicks. The Cavs have these multiple offensive threats. We'll see what Jared Allen can do. So maybe, but I also think that the Knicks, because if you think about the matchups, the Knicks having OG Anunoby is a counter to some of the stuff that Jalen Johnson wants to do. They don't have great guard defenders. I mean, they have Mikal, but to do things in a little bit different way. I at least understand if the choice theoretically was I'd rather play just the Knicks over the Cavs. Maybe there could be, maybe you have something with the analytics or the games you played over the course of the season. I'll get into the Raptors.
They did play that. I mean, they played both the Knicks and the Cavs very recently in games that mattered. Both teams tried in that Cavs-Hawks game, and both teams tried in that Knicks-Hawks game. They lost both of those games, but maybe they just felt like in that Knick game that they would have confidence. I think, we'll talk about it more. Maybe we won't, because we'll just have to talk about the series that actually exist. But I think if I were the Hawks, I would probably prefer the Knicks. I think that the Cavs like to do a lot of switching, kind of the same as the Hawks. And I think the Hawks can, both those teams, they should have an advantage in transition. The Hawks don't necessarily have a great guy to guard Karl-Anthony Towns, but I think they're probably a little bit better off. Like, Evan Mobley really has like a big interior advantage against the Hawks. And also the Knicks, Karl-Anthony Towns, like a pretty easy place for them to attack in pick and roll if they're going to put him on Daniels, or even then, right? Like, you're fine with Dyson Daniels, who's worked pretty well as a roll man, involving Towns in pick and roll, or Towns is going to have to guard a Kongu, or also Jalen Johnson going downhill at Towns. You probably feel pretty decent about, although Towns was solid switching last year. We'll have to see. Mike Brown will have some interesting things to have to work out in that series. So I think it's ultimately, especially because I don't know that they would have, I might have even slightly preferred the Knicks. And so, might as well just get the rest then if you're the Hawks. Once they had won to assure themselves a top 6 seed on Friday, then I think it was actually fine to rest the more I think about it.
And then the choice for the Raptors, first of all, they're playing the Brooklyn Nets, so you can probably win it, is a lot more pressing because the Knicks have beaten the Raptors, I believe it's 13 times straight. And so to be able to get off of
the Raps have not been remotely competitive against them, including on Friday.
And so you would love to get off of it, and they had the right matchup in Brooklyn, a very amenable dance partner.
But they played hard in that. They clearly wanted to. Also, they had the issue that they could have fallen to 7 as well.
True.
Had they lost that.
Had they lost that and had the Magic won, which they reasonably figured that the Magic could and didn't. And so it ends up being the Raps getting the 5 seed and facing the Cavs. So they're very happy. And we'll talk about it when we break down that series. The Cavs Raptors will be very interesting. Some of the strategic stuff there and the side. We'll save that because I've really been ramping myself up for Cavs Hawks and the strengths and weaknesses of those teams and how they'd be foils. And then it's not going to happen in any round now in all likelihood unless it's the conference finals. But that's part of the fun of this. So on this side, I think that the Nuggets and Spurs decision making bothered me because it just seemed like bad process. There is at least a rational explanation for the Hawks doing what they did. And then the Magic mostly tried.
Not the Magic, I would say. They mostly tried, but like the Bane thing was just really weird. I just thought just okay. If once you're up 20, sit him, sure.
Yeah. Well, and it's something that you and I know from just knowing the league and all that is that the Toronto, I'm sorry, not Toronto, the Boston Celtics, whoever plays, they're going to have their foot on the gas, and they were missing
Yeah,
a lot of important
that
players.
strategy streamed game that we did was eye-opening, where they just completely waxed the Rockets on the road without any of their top guys, really. I think maybe they had Derek White in that game, I wanna say, but they didn't have Jaylen Brown, and they were missing a couple other guys too.
Yeah. And so then from that point, everything else was pretty academic. You saw the Sixers, they took care of their business. They were
Yeah.
able to
They were
beat the
down
Milwaukee
4 at halftime.
they
I will
were
say that.
against the
But
Milwaukee Bucks. They were
but
able
then they
to
they outscored them by 20 in the 4th, and they were fine. Or in the 3rd, and then they were fine.
yeah. And then the Hornets took care of business to get to secure the 9 seed. Miami
Yeah, that
won,
was
but that
against
didn't.
New York. New York,
Mhm.
they just Mikal Bridges played 20 seconds to maintain his games played streak. I was actually hearing like a lot of crap about the Mikal Bridges thing. Like, oh yeah, it's like kind of BS that he's going to play for 20 seconds to check out. It's like, yeah, but like you put yourself in position to do that in game 82. If you did that for every rest game that you had, if you did that 4 times throughout the season in your rest games just to say that you played in a game, that would be different, right? Like you got to game 82. He clearly could have played in game 82, and there wasn't like a cumulative aspect to it. So I'm okay with him doing that in game 82. Like he would have been ready to go if it was a real game that mattered.
And it's also because inevitably people are comparing it to AC Green and everything else, is that he's healthy enough that he could have played full minutes in this game. This wasn't a
That's what I was saying. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, an ankle injury or anything. Yeah, it's a different player because when we're eventually, I don't know that it'll be us comparing those streaks. It's like, yeah, he could. I'm fine with that. And so the Knicks sitting the rest of their guys, they had nothing to play for. They don't owe it to the Heat to play their guys in that game against the Hornets. So sure, by all means.
It was also interesting is Con Knipple, first rookie ever to lead the NBA in 3-pointers made, and second was his teammate LaMelo Ball. He actually beat him by 1, although LaMelo didn't play as much as he did. He had a higher 3-point rate. But in any event, yeah. So Charlotte's gonna be 9, Miami 10, and that will be a pretty interesting game. That's going to be reminder. That's going to be on Tuesday. The 9-10 in the East will be on Tuesday. Wednesday will be Sixers Magic. And I do think the Celtics, by beating the Magic, did get an advantage because I would rather play Philly without Joel Embiid in the first round than the Magic. I know the Magic have been pretty miserable lately, but they still gave the Celtics a pretty difficult series last year. They have Bane now, and they're going to switch. Jamal Mosley is pretty familiar with this group. Like I would, the Magic are kind of play physically. The Sixers just don't do that at all with. So I think I would. I mean, maybe you could say that Maxey is like the hardest individual matchup, and that he could go off and beat you, but in a way that the Magic aren't going to. But I would rather play Philly than the Magic, and so I would. Now you might say, hey, Philly, if they beat the Magic, they're better than them. I don't know that I see that in a
Well,
one game
and
situation.
And plus, as the Celtics, you just put a charge into the other team you could theoretically play by beating them without your guys. And so the Magic seem tenuous in certain ways. Let's just put it that way. So you don't have that
Yeah,
downside either. And
yeah.
you did it with your backups and the mental part of this and everything else. So it is a we'll spend a lot of time breaking it down over the next week, but this is a fascinating East bracket. And unlike the West, where things ended up the way I expected in an unexpected way, the East is I'm going to have to process a lot of these matchups because it's not what I'd been gaming myself up for.
So just to run through it, the Pistons did get to their 60 wins. I was reminded of the Fred VanVleet AC joint injury for the last team that was kind of like, hey, this is look at us. This is so unexpected. Let's get to 60 just because it's a round number, even though we have everything wrapped up. And that Raptors, Fred VanVleet wasn't himself in the playoffs. They got swept in the second round in the LeBronto series. And so they're 60-22. Celtics, incredible. 4th best record in the NBA, 3rd best net rating. Sorry, 4th best net rating in the NBA as well, 56 wins. Knicks, they get to 53. Is that an over or an under? That's still an under, right? Yep,
It
they
isn't
just
under.
because they lost that game on the last day of the season, they didn't try.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, again, I don't necessarily feel particularly prescient about picking that under. So Knicks 53, Cavs 52 and 30. Raps and Hawks tied at 46 and 36. Sixers and Magic tied at 45 and 37. Then the Hornets did get to their 44 wins, so you can chalk that Watfo up for I think me, right? Did I have the higher?
You had the higher number. I'm sure of that. I just don't remember what it was. We'll do a Watfo catch up later.
Yeah, it was still, although it was still, I might still have less than 50%, but anyway, yeah, the Hornets 44 wins, Heat 43 wins.
And while we're still talking about the top of the league, worth noting right now that there are no ties in terms of the best records in terms of theoretical NBA finals. So the Thunder and Spurs would host anyone in the East. The Pistons would host against anyone else in the West, and so on and so forth. So it's if the Thunder or Spurs win the West, they will have home court, or they'll have home court in the finals.
Yeah, a couple other interesting things to note as well. I mean, we still have teams that are going to be in the play-in in this mix, but we have some picks out there that are interesting to note, and we can, since we're still talking about the good teams, we can mention this. So we'll go in order. Clippers, if they don't make the playoffs, would be the number 12 overall pick. That was actually pretty kind to the Oklahoma City Thunder back in 2022 when they got Jalen Williams with that pick. That also came from the Clippers when the Clippers did not make the playoffs out of the play-in. So that one, as of right now, that would be 12. It would go up, of course, if the Clippers are able to win their way into the playoffs. Then Portland's pick is lotto protected going to Chicago. So if they make the playoffs, that pick goes to the Bulls. But that's also noteworthy because Portland has that swap with the Bucks in 28. And so if they get rid of that obligation, then they'll be guaranteed to be able to get that swap with the Bucks in 28. Then Memphis and Charlotte have the better and worse of Orlando and Phoenix, respectively. So whichever of Orlando or Phoenix, those teams actually tied at 45 and 37. If they both make the playoffs, they'll just be a coin flip along with them and Philadelphia, which also goes to OKC, by the way. Then you have Atlanta going to San Antonio. So all these teams, there was no reason for most of these teams to just lose a game in the last day of the season to improve their draft pick in the playoff range, because basically all these picks are going to somebody else, just to remind you guys here. So Portland right now, again, this could change with the play-in results, 15, Orlando 16, Phoenix 17, Philly 18, but any of that, there'll be a coin flip for any of those. Then Atlanta will be 19th going to San Antonio. Then Toronto will be 20th. Or sorry, no, excuse me. Atlanta and Toronto are tied for 19 and 20. Then Detroit actually gets Minnesota's pick, which will be 21st. Then 22 and 23 is Cleveland and Houston. That goes to Atlanta from Cleveland. That's from the DeAndre Hunter trade. And then Philly is actually going to get a non-terrible pick. Houston was looking a lot better at the time of the trade deadline. That was the pick that OKC traded to get Jared McCain. So Philly will get 22 or 23. Then New York and the Lakers are tied at 53 at 24 and 25. And then 26, Denver actually will have their pick. Could trade it. Boston will have their pick. And then Detroit's pick actually goes to Minnesota. So Detroit ended up moving up by 7 slots in the lottery just to basically take on money. Nothing else. I don't think they did much else in that deal. That was the Minnesota to salary dump the guys that they did and get Dosunmu, but also really reduce their bill. They went down 7 slots in the lottery. Then San Antonio's pick goes to Cleveland. Again, that's part of the Hunter deal. And then Oklahoma City's pick is going to Dallas from the Anthony Davis trade, among others. Before we talk about the tankers, again, I want to put a few things in a perspective here. We can cross off another Watfo because not only did we have 4 60-loss teams this year, we had 5. That is tied for the second most ever, and the most ever in a non-expansion period. I think 97, 98, the second year after expansion, there were 6 60-loss teams, but also a correspondingly large number of 60-win teams that year. And then also, we've had the most ever 55 loss and up teams. Dallas, with an incredible close to the season. We have 8 teams who have lost not only 55, but 56 games or more, which is totally unprecedented to see that. So it really puts into stark relief how bad the tanking was. And I think like the biggest reason that happened again was that Indiana and Sacramento and New Orleans all being so bad when they weren't necessarily expected to be so bad, that then forced Washington, Brooklyn, and Utah, who we thought were going to be all the only terrible teams, it forced them to really scrape the bottom of the barrel. Then you had Memphis making that trade. They got into it. Dallas made their trade. They got into the mix as well. So to just have 8 teams that were just not trying after the trade deadline was pretty remarkable. And then really a 9th was Chicago, and then Milwaukee just sucked at the end. So, and one other thing I want to talk about here too. I've made this point before, but it really came to mind again seeing these games down the end, particularly the Memphis Utah game on Friday. Having 3 two-ways is a big part of why the basketball is so awful. Because there may have been teams before that didn't want to win, but you could only go so far. Even if you're going to, and especially if you think back to when there were only 12 players on a team, but 15, and then you have 18, and then these guys are just so bad too. And you can just feel like you could not play your 12 best players in a game. Like that just wasn't an option before. And so I think it's no surprise that tanking truly got out of control with the advent of the two-way contract. So I would be in favor of something. I mean, hopefully the incentives will just get fixed anyway, but if they aren't totally fixed, I would be in favor of something along the lines of you just can't play two-way guys in April or
like when you've been eliminated.
Yeah. Once and there's just a deadline to convert these guys by the end of the season. So yeah, that was really just so miserable. All right, let's get into now the actual lottery standings and what took place the rest of the way here.
We know the first part of this because there are 10 teams that will not make the playoffs. And so the Washington Wizards will have the best lottery odds. And remember the top three spots there, they have the same odds of a top 4 pick, but then you have a higher floor as the worst record. So the Washington Wizards will pick no worse than 5th in the draft.
Yeah, then they will for sure retain their pick.
Yes. And then after them, in terms of record, is the Indiana Pacers, 19-63. They have the second best odds by themselves. Then the Brooklyn Nets have the third best odds all by themselves. And those are the 3 teams that have the flat odds for the first 4 selections. And then, so the Pacers can pick no worse than 6th. But a reminder that if it's 5 or 6, that it is for them, that pick goes to the Clippers. So the odds of the Clippers getting this pick are a little under 50-50. It is 48% that the 47.9 that the Clippers get the pick, and then slightly over 50% that the Pacers keep it. So that'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that will be very fascinating with the lottery.
And then after that,
yeah, I can do Utah here because they have an interesting situation. There is still a chance, very, very slim, that the Utah Jazz could lose their pick to OKC. They're tied at 22-60 with Sacramento. they split the odds, of course, if you're tied in the lottery of getting into the top 4 and getting the number 1 overall pick. However, there is a coin flip to see which of those teams is higher if, in fact, neither of them go into the top 4. And if Utah were to lose that pick, they would be the 5 seed going into the lottery, and it would still be possible. 4 teams would have to pass them. They're all below them. That would just be a batshit lottery. If that happened, you would have none of Washington, Indiana, Brooklyn, Sacramento, or Utah moving up into the lottery is the only way that could happen, I think.
Well, you could have Sacramento could jump in. That would be okay. Or would it? No, I think you're right.
Yeah, so I'm saying Sacramento is above. Yeah, but even then Utah would still be 5, right? Because
you're right.
Yeah, so or sorry, they wouldn't necessarily be 5, but they would still be 8. So if Utah wins that coin flip, they are officially safe. If they lose it, I think it's about a 0.6% chance, 0.6% chance of them having 4 teams pass them and still losing the pick. But that's enough, given all the pain that Utah has gone through this season. It's still enough for you might be sweating it out at least a little bit. But they have a 50% chance of not even having to sweat it out at all. And, it's not exactly going to be a Sun in there with a 0.6% chance, even so. So, yeah, Utah and Sacramento. Then Memphis, congratulations to them for out-tanking Dallas and New Orleans to get to 25 wins, and they have the 6th seed in the lottery themselves, a 37% chance to be in the top 4. Then the Atlanta Hawks, the better of New Orleans and Milwaukee. What will their chances be of getting into the top 4 with that? They basically have the sum of the odds of the 7 seed and the 10 seed in the lottery.
I have it as a 43.2% chance of moving into the top 4.
Their most likely overall selection still would be 8th, however. So this is not, there was a point at which when New Orleans was looking a lot worse, and obviously even the possibility that Milwaukee could be a lot worse, that this might have been the highest chance of being in the top 4 and number 1 overall of any pick since the odds changed in 2019. But with New Orleans' late surge, that ended up not being the case. New Orleans and Dallas are tied with each other. They'll also have the coin flip there. And of course, that'll end up being Atlanta. Bulls by themselves, they were able to totally out tank Dallas in this game. It was our only double tank game of the day, amazingly, was this one. And Dallas scored 149 on Chicago. Lachlan Olbrich, powerless. He even summoned the ghost of Cameron Bairstow. It wasn't enough. And so Chicago 31 wins, Milwaukee 32. That's the 9 and 10 seeds. And then Golden State finished up at 37 wins. If they don't make the playoffs, they'll be 11. So anything else to talk about? I guess we hit news for these teams as well. And we should probably begin with the news that Doc Rivers will not be returning. Unclear whether it was a firing, but it's been reported that he will be paid. And that probably means it's a firing. There's talk maybe that he could be in the front office. If I were the Bucks, I would have zero interest in that whatsoever. We've seen cheap owners sometimes try to make it so at least, we're getting something for our money, but it's like, but the guy's not going to be good at their job.
Well, and I mean, of course, Doc Rivers has a sterling front office record. He has this experience. And it wouldn't
I think you haven't confused with Rock Divers. He's a totally new man at this point. But I think Wes Edens, John Horst, Jimmy Haslam, I'm sure they thank Docs for his many months of service, just like Mike Breen did. Speaking of which, would Doc, if he had it to do over again, you'd think he would have just stayed at ESPN, right? He probably would still have that job and would for a while.
Potentially. I don't think that he's still going to make the Hall of Fame and all that sort of stuff. I don't think it affects the recency, but I don't think it affects his legacy that much. These Bucks teams, that's my instinct on it. And you say, oh, this tenure exposed of these. I think that stuff had kind of already been out there. I think it would have maybe been happier for him. He could have had that job, but I think that if he wants to go back to broadcasting, he could probably just do that.
I don't know. Andrew Marchand reported that ESPN would not be particularly interested, but because he definitely fucked ESPN pretty bad
That's
by
true.
going back to the Bucks. And then the latest in the Giannis saga, he gave another 10-minute interview at the end of the season after Doc talked. He said he didn't say he wouldn't sign the extension, though. He says, I haven't been offered an extension. So if that's on the table, then I'll try to make the best decision for me and my family. He says, somebody has to offer you that for you to sign. I haven't been offered an extension. Now, technically, they can't do it until October. There's no communication between them, right? So now this means that they can't possibly discuss whether you would actually take the extension or not. Just always take the over on how long it's going to take to resolve this. But Marcus Johnson was on a podcast, the Bucks and color guy, saying that basically it's been as dysfunctional as it appeared, and those guys are around the team. It's surprising to me that he would even go that far as to say that, but I've always appreciated his forthrightness. And then he also claims that he played 3-on-3 multiple times, despite the Bucks saying that he didn't. And he said he didn't deny participation of practice. I guess that means he didn't not practice, but whatever, they didn't play. It is kind of funny that he has so much bitterness towards the organization when they put both of his brothers on the team when neither of them deserves to be an NBA player. And yet he's still pissed off at them.
Draymond talked about that, I believe, a little bit.
Yeah, what did he say?
Well, he mentioned kind of the other part of it. I can't remember everything. We don't get into all the stuff that people say about other people, but yeah, I mean the Bucks. It is, and they tried to build a team around him this year. They waived Damian Lillard, and other people criticized that move a lot more than we did, but they did that with the ability to bring in Miles Turner, which they could not have done otherwise, and realistically, and they did that, and they still sucked, and they've
the hilarity is they probably would be better off right now if they just had held on to Lillard this whole time.
Particularly if that had helped motivate Giannis to actually move things a little harder for a trade. I'm not sure that it would have.
Yeah, that's true, right? If they had just, because they would be better off it. But I mean, whatever. The Bucks, they just can't. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. Apparently,
and just briefly, because I've seen a little bit more on this with the Bucks having this bad season, the Lillard thing's such a big mistake. The money that they have, and we talked about this a lot in the moment, the money that they have tied up in the years after Giannis is currently under contract, that money is a lot less impactful than it is right now, because you go into the wilderness and you're going to be in the wilderness. And so 22 million then means a lot less than 50 million now. And so that is a trade that you make. And oh no, do you have that money that's going to prevent you from doing something? This is the Milwaukee Bucks we're talking about. They haven't been historically a free agent destination. They haven't, and they're still going to have the logistical ability to do kind of anything they want to do. And in fact, if they're going to eventually move Giannis, they probably move Miles Turner too. And if you want to prioritize spending power in the future, well, then you can have it anyway. This isn't going to prevent them. The year that could theoretically matter is 2029-30. If I had to put money on it right now, I would not expect that it will. Also,
it may prevent them from doing stuff to take on money, which I think is going to become more important in terms of getting draft pick assets. Sure. When you can't tank your way into a good draft pick, you need to now acquire as many draft picks as you can. But yeah, and we thought, hey, if they sign Turner, it's fine. They could get something for Turner. That's probably not true anymore, unfortunately. Again, I was on board with it if they were going to retain Giannis. I assumed, well, hey, if they're doing this, that means that Giannis is cool with it. But instead, it was kind of this last-ditch effort to impress Giannis so that he would sign the extension, which they had done before. It was, again, the lack of communication really kills. Well, no lack of communication from Doug Christie, despite his foible at the end of that Golden State game. And despite the fact that with their best players on the floor, they had a negative 22 net rating this season. The Kings, in part by rationalizing that Doug Christie's was torpedoed by injuries this season, they were 12-46 before they went 10-13 at the end. They're going to retain Doug Christie. Do they not know that there's going to be lottery reform?
I mean, when the league does an investigation into your team's behavior and they eventually determine that, no, your coach is incompetent and just didn't know what was going on and made the wrong decision, that should be a signal that your coach should not be retained. And it is incredible. And the other component of this is, okay, so the piece from Sam Amick talked about how the Kings were bad from the start and 12-46. There was a phrase about there were roster realities outside of Christie's control. Well, yeah, you know what the answer to that is? You fire Perry too. You fire both of these people. You get them both out. And yes,
that's right. I'm like, oh, does that mean they're going to fire Scott Perry? No, supposedly it was all just injuries. That's why you went 12-46. But yeah, let's recall, with your good players on the floor, you were negative 22 net rating. Now Christie is under contract for next season at approximately $2 million annually, which Tom Dundon might say that's a lot of money for a coach, but most people don't. So that's that is I'm sure a reason why he's sticking around. And even Amick said the choice has been made to keep Christie at the helm for the start of next season and continue the evaluation from there. Again, if they were trying to tank next season, I would get it. But it just, and especially if they get a top pick, you can't go into next season with Doug Christie. And this idea, they went 10-13. How many of those wins were against real teams?
Hilariously, a couple of them were.
Because two of them. Okay, fine.
So of their wins at the end, they beat the Raptor. They beat the Warriors, and that was a game that Steph Curry did play.
No, that's not a real game. The Warriors had no incentive to win that game.
The Raptors on April 1st.
Yeah, that was a real win.
The Clippers on March 14th.
Okay, real win.
And I'm not going to count the Pacers. The Bulls on March 8th. I mean, they had already tanked out their roster.
No, Bulls. I mean, because they're like the Bulls were. Yeah, I mean, Mills were kind of trying maybe at that point. I don't know. I'm not going to count games against the other bottom 10 teams. I'm not counting.
Yeah. And then so before that, and they'd lost a lot of games in the interim. They played, so post trade deadline, they beat Dallas and they beat Memphis. That is the entirety of their wins. So if anyone, because Amick's reporting was from team sources, saw that as a signal that the team was playing well under Doug Christie or anything else,
that was all about them just trying. That's it. Because they're playing actual NBA basketball,
which they should not have been doing.
No. Well, I mean, I'm okay with them playing Reynaud and Cardwell. Now, could they have maybe rested those guys for just a couple of games, right? They should have at least found a way to lose that Warriors game on Friday.
Well, and the
4 seed in the lottery.
They beat the Pelicans, who were trying to win because they didn't have their pick at all. They beat the Pelicans a week ago, 2 weeks ago.
All right, that's a semi-legitimate one. Anyway, no, the idea that Doug Christie became this great coach and man, look at the development of Maxime Reynaud and Dylan Cardwell. No, I'm sorry. Absolutely not. So I mean, and do I think that Scott Perry really wants to keep Doug Christie? I don't think that. I think that Vivek Ranadive just wants to.
I disagree.
Feel like it's working. No,
I disagree. I think it's both. So I think it's the Vivek money part of it. But here's the other thing: if this didn't get you fired as Scott Perry, you can use Doug Christie as your sacrificial lamb next year.
Of course, no. That's what I'm saying. Scott might be on board with it but only because Vivek is on board with it, and then you get yourself more time.
Mm-hmm.
Chicago is going to hire a search firm, which I think is a good thing. But then CEO Michael Reinsdorf announced that any candidate must be committed to retain Billy Donovan. The quote was, "If I interview someone and they're not sold on Billy, they're not sold on a Hall of Fame coach. If Billy wants to be our coach and someone's not interested in that, then they're probably not the right candidate for us." He also cited Billy going deep into the playoffs with Oklahoma City. Oh, you mean when he actually did coach a pretty good playoffs back in 2016 when he had Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook and Serge Ibaka and Steven Adams.
I mean,
But
they did blow a 3-1 lead.
Yes, that is true. Although I wouldn't necessarily chalk that to coaching. Maybe their late game offense is pretty hopeless. But in any event, yeah. And then he lost series he was favored in 20, not by us, but he was not favored by us. But he lost series he was favored in 2018 and 2019. Never got past the first round after that, and certainly didn't with the Chicago Bulls. So yeah, no, he's not a Hall of Fame coach because of what he's done in the NBA. Like, it's great that he won a national championship or two in Florida, but that was 20 years ago.
It's 2, and they still hurt me. So that I can remember those.
And it's not also simply about having the coach in place. You know, like that could be okay. We got this great young coach. We really like him. Would you be willing to work with him? You know, if it doesn't work out, then you can have your own guy. Like, okay, that's reasonable. But any candidate is going in knowing that Billy Donovan, rather than them, is the most powerful person in the organization. And that is not where you want to be if you have a lot of leverage. And Casey Johnson, he said, well, Tim Connolly, there's precedent for this. Tim Connolly came in to Minnesota and they wanted to keep Chris Finch. Okay, well, first of all, Chris Finch had already proven himself to be a pretty good coach. And secondly, it's Tim Connolly. They're willing to pay him way more than he was getting in Denver, and he already had a great track record. You know what? If the Bulls get someone with the track record of Tim Connolly to come in and be their GM and work with Billy Donovan, I will eat my words. I think this makes that much less likely.
Particularly because Billy Donovan has been a lot of the reporting has been such a staunch advocate for a specific path. And so if you think that he is more powerful than you, and you have any inclination that the pathway to being better long term is the one that you and I agree with, well, then you're not going to want this job because you're putting yourself in a position to fail because the ownership and the coach are aligned. They're aligned against you, and so they're narrowing the field to the people who are more thinking this way. And broadly speaking, I think that they're not the people that we'd agree with.
Well, I will say I've made this point a number of times that signing vets to be a little bit better now doesn't matter as much if the lottery odds are going to be flattened, as appears is probably going to be the case. So it's not as damaging as it was before, but still bringing in older guys who aren't going to be a part of your future, not leaving open cap space to make transactions, signing veterans rather than signing flyer young players. Like the organizational priority and your self-assessment does still matter. It just doesn't matter quite as much as it did before. But the crawl, walk, run approach of team building is going to be a little more appealing than it was in the past. Okay. Is that all we got to hit for today? Can we finish up our awards?
Yes, I think we can.
All right, then. Where would you like to start?
Considering this is the last game that Cooper Flagg will play this season, I think we start with Rookie of the Year, which is a juicier category when you consider the run that Flagg went on towards the end of the year.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And Flagg did have some massive games, but I can't count that enough. I think Con Knippel, again, I agree that Cooper Flagg is going to be the superior player. And Con Knippel didn't have the absolute greatest close of the season, and maybe Charlotte would have already made the playoffs had he played a little bit better in the last 2 weeks. But Cooper Flagg was on a team that basically the only point for them was trying to get him more stats. I think it was interesting that once Tim Bontemps' Rookie of the Year poll came out, that he started putting up some big stats. I don't think they were like force feeding him or anything, but it was silly season. They're easy. The Mavs weren't particularly competitive in any of these games. Like the game where he had 50, they were started the fourth quarter down by 30 points. And yeah, okay, they got back within 13 at one point, but Yeah, that was not like a real 50 points. I'm sorry. Like when you start the quarter down by 30, it's not as bad as the Devin Booker 70, but it's still, you just got to discount it. It wasn't real. And that doesn't mean that I think that what Cooper Flagg was doing was easy by any means, but I also just don't think that this big surge that he had the last 2-3 weeks should win it for him versus a guy who was led the NBA in 3-pointers and analytically was just way better than he was. And so I normally would go with the better prospect. If it's a tie, it's not a tie to me. What do you think?
I don't think it's even particularly close to a tie. I really like Cooper Flagg, and if Flagg had been as good defensively as we hoped he could be, maybe this would have been closer. But Flagg wasn't that type of player. I think Concaniple was clearly better offensively, and sure, there you could say a yay points. Cooper Flagg had this incredibly high usage. He had the highest usage rate of any rookie by a lot. Jeremiah Fears was number two, and then you go down among guys who were like starting playing real minutes to Trey Johnson at 22, and then Connor Knipple, you could round up to 22. Okay, he took a lot more shots. Cooper Flagg, final year number, 55% true shooting. Con Knipple, 63. And the three point record, as we talked about, the first rookie ever to lead the league in 3-pointers made. I like Cooper Flagg. I think the Flagg will be the better player, but Con Knipple has made that a much closer question. I didn't see this as particularly close.
Yeah, I mean, we could go through everything that we possibly can to show that. Hornets with Concaniple on the floor plus 6.5. They're 3.5 points 100 better when Knipple is on the floor. Mavs with Cooper Flagg on negative 5.7. They're actually worse when he was on the floor. 109 offensive rating with Cooper Flagg on the floor. Again, there's not much around it, but if you're going to say he was just like so unbelievable this year, like he was putting up individual stats, and those individual stats do augur very, very well for his future, particularly because he's a lot younger than Khan is. But yeah, you talked about the true shooting. Then you also, if you look at any of the advanced stats, DPM 1.8 to 0.5. Sorry, that's offensive DPM. Overall DPM is 1.1 to 0. Then EPM 3.0 to negative 0.5. Khan also played more minutes than Flagg. He played 12 more games than Flagg. He played 78 games. So it's just not a contest at all. There's no statistic you can point to other than points per game to say that Cooper Flagg was better than Concaniple this year.
And to the extent that you could say like total creation, the idea
and even that, even points right points per 36, Con is within one of Cooper Flagg.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry.
And even their passing creation wasn't that different. Yeah. It was Flagg had a few more, but not that many more than Con Knipple, and Knipple was a part of this successful offense. And if there's a fair argument to say that Cooper Flagg, it was a tough go for him. He had to have the ball in his hands more. He had worse surrounding talent, sure, but it's not who will be the better player. It's who had the better year, and Con Knipple had the better year.
Yeah. If Cooper Flagg were on the Hornets, could he have put up a season that was as valuable as Con Knipple? It's possible, but ultimately, you have to judge guys in the situation that they're in. And I'm not 100% certain that going into next year, I think that Con Knipple will be a better player than Cooper Flagg, but he had a better season this year, and it's enough that it's not even close. Then Cooper Flagg was obviously number 2. I thought VJ Edgecombe was a pretty clear number 3. Did you agree with that?
I did. I've really liked Cedric Howard over the course of the year, but VJ was able to play more towards the end. He was a successful part of a team. Yeah, that's a play-in team, but they were still a successful outfit. And the Sixers were better off having Edgecombe on the team, and they were better with him on than they were with him off. He was a positive player, and I really like Cedric Howard. I think that he could be good. So Cedric Howard to me was the 4th spot. I have him on my first team all rookie, but VJ gets the 3rd spot on my ballot.
Yeah, particularly the two somewhat similar arguments in terms of the type of players and contributions that they were making. And maybe you could say that VJ's season is a little bit overrated, 54% true shooting, and his 3-point percentage went down throughout the year. But obviously he was valuable to his team. Nick Nurse wouldn't have played him over 2,500 minutes and 72 games played. I mean, his minutes advantage over Coward is almost 1,000, and
Mhm.
he led rookies in minutes. He, Knipple, and Flagg were the only 3 rookies to average over 30 minutes a game this season. So yeah, it's really not close. And then, like you, I had on my all rookie team, uh, Cedric Coward, and then the last of them was Dylan Harper for me.
Same here. And Dylan Harper had a strong close to the year. He ended up with 57% true shooting on the season. The Spurs had a 116.9 offensive rating when Harper was on the floor, and he does play a fair amount with another creator, plays a fair amount with Victor Wembanyama, but he did a really nice job towards the end of the year, and so I had him as a pretty clear last guy on this. And I think maybe if the season had extended a little longer, he could have pushed towards the ballot conversation, but he didn't have a better overall season because the first half counts than Coward or than VJ.
Yeah, unfortunately, Harper also only played 1,400 minutes, but yeah, net rating of 9.8 is pretty awesome. And yeah, he came on towards the end of the year too. He's shooting 55% on threes in his last 20 games coming into today. That was a pretty remarkable. So he's just, as you're looking at this list of players, other than maybe Ryan Kalkbrenner and Ugo Gonzalez, I would maybe put Murray Boyles and Dylan Cardwell in this conversation too. But just in terms of like who helped their team the most this year, like he's clearly it would in the top 5. And then you also throw in the prospect component, which is important to me. I still would have him. I think just because of what Khan did this year, you probably would have to have him below Khan, but he's in this would be in the same tier to me if we did it. If we did a redraft, I think it would be a very interesting decision between he and Khan. So that's I think we have the same top 5. Then who were your second team all rookies? We don't have to spend too much time on this.
My top three choices I thought were pretty hard to argue against. So Colin Murray Boyles, wonderful defensively. Hugo Gonzalez, being a valued rotation player on the second best team in the East, that was an easy pick for me. And then I had Ryan Kalkbrenner as a clear cut one as well. He got
Yeah.
usurped by Musa Diabate, but Ryan Kalkbrenner did a very good job in his spot. He was brutally efficient offensively. He was a solid rim protector. So even if it ends up being a backup center on a credible team, he was that, and he did it consistently when he was available for health. So I thought those 3 players, they were easily on my second team, and then I had a number of different candidates for the last 2 spots.
Yeah, just to go through Kalkbrenner a little bit more. The Hornets were better without him on the floor, but they're still positive when he played, and he's
Mhm.
statistically one of the better rim protectors in the league. Solid offensive rebounder, and incredibly efficient score with 76% true shooting. So he really added a lot to this group. Didn't really make a lot of mistakes, and I don't think he probably wouldn't be in my top 10 of players I'd want going forward. But there just was a paucity of players who contributed positively. Again, to be a play as many minutes as he did on a good team, 1,400 minutes was impressive to me. And Colin Murray Boyles just was really a huge impact defender. Maybe you worry a little bit about only 54 games and 1,200 minutes, but these guys, most of these guys are not much higher than that. And the ones who are just didn't play all that well. So you do start to get down the end of this of who the guys who are a prospect are. Like Ace Bailey, you can't really look at his statistical resume and say it was great. This is a lot of this is just watching him and what I think the improvements he was able to make over the course of the season. So he had to be on there
I had
for
him too.
me. Again, this is getting down to the point where, all right, am I going to take I don't know who would I take? Am I going to take Dylan Cardwell over him? Like I don't think so. Dylan Cardwell only played 41 games in the end. He was awesome, and I apologize. Like he was definitely a better player than Ace Bailey this season, but you still have to. I don't know that Dylan Cardwell is ever going to be even a starter, right? And he wasn't on a real team. It was in silly season. He did really help the Kings win to the extent that he was out there, but it was still the difference between he and Kalkbrenner in terms of playing time and just the team that they're on and playing real games is just too much. And then I did put Ugo Gonzalez on
Oh yeah.
this group too, just a plus 11.8 net rating. Now, do I take something from the fact that he didn't play very much after Jason Tatum came back? Yeah, perhaps so. I might be open to it, but like Trey Johnson, Will Riley, like, I'm sorry, you guys didn't do enough. I did have Derek Queen on my second team. So who are we? I have Ace, Queen, Kalkbrenner, Murray Boys, and Gonzalez. So who am I missing that you had?
The only player, so I hadn't mentioned my last two. Ace Bailey was one of those spots. And then the last one, I considered a bunch of different guys. I ended up preliminarily going with Igor Joman. I think that he has his flaws. I've talked about how I don't like him as a prospect moving forward, but I thought he making the 3-pointers, he did enough for the Nets. Like I didn't love anybody that last. This is such a good class that we didn't have to do it. And one of my things working through it is I don't value volume if it's unsuccessful. And I thought that Joman, I'm fine with Derek Queen. He was the next guy that I had there. And I had those two guys over somebody like Trey Johnson. But it's, it's a great field if you could get this deep into getting the qualms that I'm talking about. Usually we're getting that around first or second team.
Yeah, and Maxime Reynaud got a lot of pub towards the end. I mean, number one, again, he's putting up these numbers mostly in silly season. And number two, his overall statistical resume is just not impressive. He's a horrible rim protector. And his offensive resume is just not really that great. 61% true shooting is below the positional average. He actually is below average as a shot maker because he was getting a lot of really high quality shots, which, in part he deserves credit for being in the right position to generate it. But it was 29% from three. That part of his game didn't really develop very much. And the Kings had a negative 11.7 net rating with him on the floor, and he's already 23. So, like Ace Bailey, he actually contributed when the Jazz were winning some games early. And he's also 19 and is just a much better level of prospect. Another guy I struggled with was Jeremiah Fears, who actually had 3 straight 35-point games to end the season. Again, not in real games. I do recommend just watching his highlight reel for the season. If you go just fire it up on YouTube, it's pretty fun. He's a great watch, but ultimately also just was not a good player this season.
Yeah, it's just not something that I want to put a guy on Auburn who played a lot, who took a lot of shots, but wasn't particularly good at that sort of stuff. So
he wasn't. The Pels were not that much worse when he played. Negative 6.8 net rating versus negative 5.1. I guess Queen would be the other. We didn't talk about him really. Remember when I said we weren't going to spend that much time on this? But then I get tired, and perversely, I just end up talking longer when that happens. So, Queen, why did he make your second team, even though he had kind of fallen off by the end of the year?
He didn't make mine over Joman. I put
Joman. Okay.
And I mean, between those two, Derek Queen, 54% true shooting on the year as a big, even if he's not a true 5. And at times he showed a little bit more defensive fight, but I just didn't love it. And with Joman, he didn't do a lot right, but he did an important thing in terms of hitting those jump shots, 39% on almost 9 per 36. And a fair amount of that was self-created too. Like we broke down Joman, both these guys, in real detail on those young player pods that I enjoyed doing so much. So a lot of that is out there. But I thought Joman, he missed the end of the season with his plantar fascia issue. I care about that a lot less for all rookie teams, especially when we're getting down there. So I thought Joman was just a teensy bit better.
Yeah, I still had to. I guess the Nets had a few moments when they were competing when he was maybe contributing some, but I think Queen just had enough like monster games that I felt he showed enough to get on there. But I didn't love any of those spots towards the end. That's why all rookie is always a second team all rookie is a little bit ridiculous. But the NBA is selling hope after all. Let's go ahead and do sophomore of the year since we are on the subject here. And I think it clearly had to be Stephon Castle.
Agreed. And Castle, his passing growth is really impressive. So Castle up to almost 9 assists per 36 minutes and still can't hit the jump shot, but he's a plus defender. One of the better
ones. He hit it more throughout the course of the year.
True. And the passing growth for him is fantastic and getting better inside the arc. So Stephon Castle being at 58% true shooting, despite his limitations as a jump shooter overall, getting up to 33% is respectable. So he's a clear-cut number one. And I do this in line with, I do it spiritually the same as Rookie of the Year, even though it's a made-up award for us. It's not prospect rankings. It's who had the best season. And so Castle, pretty clear number one for me.
Yeah, I think, and I throw in a tiebreaker for that as well, the prospect aspect. So yeah, Castle had to be number one, and especially just how much he contributed to a winning team. And I think he's the best player, and probably would at this point in time. I denied it most of the year. Alex Sarr might end up really having some moments, but Castle, the way he's continued to come on, I think he would have to go number one even for me in a redraft at this point. Then second, there really isn't that someone that I loved there, particularly with Sarr. It's so hard on a team like Washington to really, if you're doing any kind of a value based award. So Sarr was not even in my top three. He also didn't play very much this year either.
Well,
So ultimately went with Donovan Clingan, who actually led. No, I'm sorry. That was who led this class in minutes. I think it was actually I think Reed Shepard might have eventually. Although I these stats from a couple days ago, so don't quote me on that. But Clingan was right up there, over 2,000 minutes, played 74 games, one of the best offensive rebounders in the league, and his 3-pointer actually started to come along some. His defense got better, ironically, right around the time Shaden Sharp stopped playing for the Blazers, and so I thought he was really a very, very solid center for Portland and already at age 22. So he was second. I mean, it's a little disappointing to not pick someone that I think has even the slightest all-star potential second, but that's the 24 draft for you.
I ended up going with AJ Mitchell second. And
yeah, he was three for me.
And so Mitchell,
if he had played a little bit more, I probably would have. And Clingan had 600 more minutes than him, so that was why I ultimately went with him third. But he was better than Clingan, I would say.
So Nate, I just looked it up. The eventual winner of most minutes played in the sophomore class was Bub Carrington. He ended up because Modest Buzelis got hurt at the end. It would have been Buzelis, but because he got hurt towards the end,
my problem is I sorted my sheet by EPM and I just couldn't scroll down all the way
far enough
to fit him among sophomores on my screen. I have a 34-inch monitor too. I still couldn't fit on it.
Yeah, so Carrington first, Buzelis second, Reed Shepard third, and Clingan, a totally deserving player on this as well. He has proven to be good at the things that I hoped he would be as a rim protector, and his offensive game has grown a little bit. I worried about his hands a lot. I still worry about them some, but also that vaguely intriguing 3-point shooting. I still am not a firm believer in it, but there's a little something there. I also wanted to shout out, and I actually have Clingan fourth because I have Modest Buzelis third, and
yeah, he was also considered. That's interesting. Buzelis he's had an interesting year where he's kind of come on, kind of putting up some stats, like kind of helping the Bulls win a little bit, but there's still, it's taking me too long to come around to him. I don't know.
For me, it was our conversation back when we did the power forward position rankings, where I moved him up to not only to 20th, but moved him into a tier with some other established players. I just feel better about him right now than I do Clingan. And I say that it's mostly about resume. I thought both those guys did totally fine in those respects. But I think Buzelis,
I would take Buzelis in a prospect ranking, I think.
Yeah. So I ended up going, so my ranking was I went Castle 1, Mitchell 2, then Buzelis 3, Clingan 4. But again, it's tight with all those guys.
Yeah, and other sophomores I really want to recognize: Dennis Jenkins,
sure,
who is technically a sophomore. Alex Sarr still, I think he's really talented. It just was, who knows what was going on with all of his injuries and not playing fourth quarter. He's not going to win an award like this, especially when it's made up and I'm deciding the criteria. Reed Shepard took a big step forward this year. Yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead, Reed Shepard.
Yeah, Reed Shepard took a big step forward this year. It became a deadly shooter, but still needs to round out more of his game, particularly passing and defense. And then Oso Ighodaro, I think, was a really good starting level of center this year. So that'll get you into the conversation in the 24 draft.
Jalen Tyson is another guy I wanted to shout out. An incredible improvement for him. 61% true shooting, 46% on threes. And I wish he had, hadn't missed some time towards the end of the year. But I'm a Jalen Tyson believer, so I wanted to make sure we mentioned it.
All right, let's go to sixth man of the year now.
This feels to me like a wide open field this year. And you have a number of different candidates. I something that I do just for fun after I do my ballot is I look at the best I can find on the betting odds of it and see. And sixth man of the year is historically one that I have a big difference from the conventional wisdom on, and that is
yay points.
That is true yet again this year. And
so who are the betting favorites, by the way? Since you looked it up, I never look at that type of stuff.
Last time I looked at it, which was when I did my first prep on this, which was a week ago, the leader was Keldon Johnson.
Yeah, I guess that's not surprising. He'd score off the bench on a good team. Was Jaquez in there too?
Jaquez was 2. So the ones that I'm seeing, Keldon Johnson 1, Jaquez 2, and then Shepard and Reed tied for 3rd.
So I'll give some of my criteria. I think one of the biggest things that I'm looking for is someone who is closing games. Now, certain guys are on such a good team that Keldon Johnson, maybe it's okay that he's not closing games. Though, does he have such unbelievable players in front of him like Harrison Barnes and Julian Champagny? No, I wouldn't say that necessarily. If he were really that good, he may play more, I think, in the playoffs because they're going to just have a need for a more traditional power forward, particularly in that Nugget series. But yeah, I think that's kind of the concern for me. And I also am looking for a guy whose team is better with him on the floor than off. Again, Keldon Johnson, his team's worse. Like they're really awesome when he's off the floor too. They have a lot of other really good players, one in particular. But yeah, Keldon Johnson was not quite in the mix for me because I just didn't feel him on a regular basis. I think he got out in transition, took advantage of some second units, and was like, yeah, okay, 3-point shooter, 37%, about the positional average in terms of per 36 3-point attempts. He just wasn't someone that I felt impacted the game as much as some of the players that I am going to list. And then same thing with Jaquez. He's just put up big numbers as a backup, but wasn't overall that efficient in the end. Did do a lot of passing off of his drives, but I think he wasn't capable of beating good defenders and was very rarely closing games and didn't give you really much on defense. So I just don't ultimately the last thing that I'll put in for my criteria, which I think are different than most, is just who do I think is a better player? And so that's how I got to the guys that I did, but I'll let you lead us off here with your picks.
Like you, I have a very different approach to this than a number of people, and that's fine. But for me, the core question is, can you play? Do you make your team better? And I will differentiate it. For me, was a little tricky. Is to me the best player who came off a bench this year was Alex Caruso. I think that Caruso, you see that impact defensively. We discussed Caruso at length in our all defensive pod. I think that Caruso was, to me, somewhat clearly, I mean, the defensive value, and this was a worse offensive year for him than normal. And I think that he benefits in some ways for that, this being a weaker 6 man of the year field than normal to my eye. And so I think Caruso is the best player who came off the bench. But if you notice, I'm using that phrasing very deliberately because there is also an element of this, which is it's not as aggressive as most valuable player, but it's, how much do you actually play? How much do you actually help your team? And Alex Caruso barely got over 1,000 minutes this year by the end of it. And so that's hard, but I'm going to mention Caruso because he does make my ballot by virtue of being the best player to my eye who came off the bench this year.
Yeah, he was third for me, but 17.8 net rating. That's better than Victor Wembanyama, by the way. 99.2 defensive rating when he's on the floor. There is some shooting luck involved there, and shooting luck can be a lot easier to obtain when you play fewer minutes. And also because he's playing 18.5 minutes per game and 54 games played as of a couple of days ago. Again, apologies, these aren't quite up to date, but we got to do this research a little bit ahead of time. Then it's easier to play hard and have a huge impact in fewer minutes. So I do acknowledge that, but it still is a crazy impact. If you said on a good team, would you rather have Alex Caruso or Jaime Jaquez on it? It's not a contest. You would rather have Alex Caruso. And that's, I would say, even in the regular season, because he just has so much impact. So he was actually third on my ballot.
I want to briefly shout out somebody who didn't make my ballot, but as longtime listeners know, I'm a huge fan of the player, which is Robert Williams had a very nice year, a little bit under the
Yeah.
radar with the Portland Trailblazers. He didn't make my ballot, but I've been a Rob Williams guy for a long time. And then Mitchell Robinson was somebody else that I really considered. I think that a lot of times the Knicks have been better when he's been available. But my top two, I did pick a big man, and that wasn't either of those two gentlemen, and it was Isaiah Stewart. I ended up putting Isaiah Stewart second. I had him first the last time we did awards, in part because he's just missed so much time, unfortunately. So he hasn't helped the Pistons because he hasn't been able to play. And then my number one was AJ Mitchell. And Mitchell, it's a somewhat complicated case because AJ Mitchell's best stuff, and this happens sometimes with six men, was when he played with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. But that also partially illustrates the point because AJ Mitchell ended up closing a fair amount of games for the Thunder because they needed somebody who could do what he could do out there. And Mitchell played almost 500 more minutes than Caruso. And so even if I think Caruso is better per minute, that's a huge difference in terms of what they did for the Thunder. So I went with Mitchell 1, Stewart 2, Caruso 3.
AJ Mitchell had the highest EPM of this group, but almost all of that positive value came on defense, and I'm just not buying that. I think there's some collinearity effects there that are just not getting filtered out. Interesting that DPM is nowhere near as impressed. That's got him as a neutral defender. And again, and this is EPM, by the way. It's not to belittle the metric because they have a different metric that looks towards predicts future performance of how good the guy actually is. What we usually cite is the one that's just what the number they actually put up on the season. So that is that number. I don't mean to imply that EPM is like not good or anything. It's a very good metric. And so I didn't ultimately go with Mitchell because I thought there was another guy who was kind of similar to him who had a better case, and that was actually Dennis Jenkins. Dennis Jenkins is my sixth man of the year.
Oh, I like that.
He sealed it for me with what he was able to do while Cade Cunningham was out. With Dennis on playing with the starters, they were really good in this stretch. They really didn't miss a beat, frankly, statistically. Obviously, it was silly season with him in there and Cade out, but then also was able to come off the bench, and he closed a lot of games for Detroit as well. Played 69 in the end. So I think he was actually the most valuable player coming off the bench this year. Maybe I should have given Mitchell more than I did. I actually went number 2, Osoi Gadaro, another guy who was the best center on his team, closed a bunch of games, plus 5.4 net rating, 7.4 points per 100 better with them on the floor. Almost all of that coming on defense. Rim protection numbers were shockingly good given his lack of hops and really a defensive reputation. Opponents shot 57% around the rim, contest rate of 29% of opponent field goals within 5 feet. And so he was actually number 2 for me because, I was just impressed by the fact that he's able to close games and be as effective as he was. And clearly, he gave you some passing on the offensive end too, but clearly was someone that the coach really trusted and came through for a team that desperately needed his skill set.
I think I was giving insufficient credence to Dennis Jenkins. He absolutely deserves to make my ballot. To me, the stat that is just so impressive with Jenkins, and you brought it up a little bit, but I just wanted, because we're talking about him, and I'm going to move him up to 2. I'm going to move him over his teammate Isaiah Stewart. Is Jenkins on, Cade Cunningham off, because that's that's Jenkins running the show. I'm not focused as much on the plus 8.1 net rating because a lot of that is that they've been great on defense. It's that
although he is pretty good on defense himself.
He is, but it's they have 116.3 offensive rating. Jenkins on, Cunningham off. That's well above the league average. And to do that with their surrounding talent, they're often playing limited shooting, and because unlike a lot of guys, and yes, it's weird to use the starting minutes to really fortify this point, but they were able to put that together. And so Jenkins, I don't think I could quite put him over AJ. But he deserves to be number 2 at minimum. I should have thought about that more. And 6th man of the year is a notoriously hard one to review because there aren't really the criterias on it. So that's a really good point.
Yeah. And again, like there could be Isaiah Stewart, totally like Ayo Dosunmu, which should have had the individual statistics, but his team was just always worse with him on the floor. So I ultimately just couldn't get there with him. And Naz Reid had a nice year as well. Shepard, Tim Hardaway Jr. had his best shooting season. I thought he was really outstanding as well. Played a ton of minutes too in this category. Luke Cornett should have been in this mix as well. Jalen Williams from OKC. If Miles McBride had been able to play more, he would have actually been maybe right towards the top of this group. Uh,
Well,
Dylan Harper, Isaiah Joe, Jamal Shed. So there are a lot of differentiating between all these guys is pretty difficult.
and I will say Keldon Johnson, I think he had a strong year. 61% true shooting on 21 usage, bumped up his threes back to the second best of his kind of the real part of his career, and over 60% on twos. He was at 63% at one point, but 60% on twos is still very, very good.
Now we'll move on to one of my favorite awards, and we don't talk about it during the season because particularly shooting improvement can have a lot of variability. And also I love to spend a lot of time on this award, which is most improved. And I take it in a little bit different viewpoint than a lot of people do, as do you. I think you and I are usually on the same wavelength with this, and because we're focused mostly on valuable improvement, and voters historically have really done that. If you look at the history of the award, last year Dyson Daniels is probably the lowest level of player to win it since, back when it used to just be like a lot worse players maybe 15 years ago or so. Or like Ryan Anderson won it in 2012. And then here are your winners past that point. Paul George, Goran Dragic, Jimmy Butler, CJ McCollum, Giannis, Victor Oladipo when he made second team All NBA, Pascal Siakam, Brandon Ingram, Julius Randle, John Morant, Lowry Markin, and Tyrese Maxey. So these are all guys who ascended to at least all-star adjacent level. And I tend to say that if I'm going to pick someone even on my ballot at all, that's what they have to do. If you're just coming out of nowhere to be a pretty good player, I was not really as on board with Daniels. He did get the 3 steals per game last year, but I didn't really even think that he had improved that much. And that's the other thing that I look for really closely is, can I watch your game and be like, oh, this guy just looks like a different player. He's added skills and he's doing things totally differently. Jimmy Butler in 2015 being perhaps the most salient example of that, where this guy changed his game. He really learned some new tricks. It wasn't simply just refining the things that he was already doing, but you're like, wow, if you watch film on this guy this year, he just looks like a totally different player. So I'm looking for that aspect in most improved, in addition, of course, to the statistical improvement.
And I'll mention that one other thing that you and I have fixated on a lot more over the years is that this is not about minutes improvement. Somebody who was a similarly good player who's just playing a lot more. And there were a number of players over the years where that has been the case for their argument. That isn't necessarily for winning it, but for being there. And so you were a 20-minute a game guy, then you're you're a 10-minute a game guy, then you're a 30, and all of a sudden you tripled your scoring average. Well, yeah, that's what was supposed to happen. And for me, going back to my time at Real GM Radio, the way I used to phrase this in the preview pods was a team or a player that we're thinking about differently. And that's really is one of the big criteria for me with most of the players, someone that we're just, and like the idea of a marginal win in any sport, the higher stuff is more important. The growth from being being a non All NBA player to an All NBA player is more important than going from being a fringe starter to a true starter to even an average starter. And this year, I didn't think that there was this like sterling case, but I thought there were 5 people. And worth noting briefly, most improved player does have the 65 game rule apply, which I don't love. It didn't affect my top of the ballot, but I don't think it's an award that should just thematically, because there are a number of different guys where, like, even for example, Moussa Diabate is technically ineligible for the actual award because of the way the games played and minutes played in the games you do apply. And I think that's really dumb, but he wouldn't have probably made my ballot anyway. I just wanted to note that at the outset. But so I thought there were 5, and it's unusual to have this, very strong cases and honestly similar levels of quality cases, some that are a little bit different. So I think we should take at least a little bit of time to talk about each of the 5.
No, absolutely. why don't you throw those 5 out there, and if I had any others that I really had in consideration, we can discuss them afterwards.
I will not throw them out in order just because we'll talk about it, but I'll Jalen Duren, Jalen Johnson, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Denny Avdia, and Victor Wembanyama.
Yeah, and that Victor, let's take his candidacy first, because that's the other candidate that I think is always ignored in this, is someone who is already at an all-star level who makes a big leap. And I don't think, since none of those guys that I mentioned, John Morant, I can't remember whether he made the all-star team in 21 before he got most improved in 22, but it's very rare that a player will have made the all-star team the previous season and then gets most improved, which I think is not fair at all. Like, there's such a big difference between the 24th best player in the NBA and being on even second team all NBA. That is a massive improvement. So let's start with Wembanyama, and certainly where it has to begin is simply the effect that he's had on the floor, and his net rating of plus 17, that was plus 2.5 last year. And defensive rating on the floor, 110 last year. Still very good, right? The Spurs were like the 4th or 5th best defense when he was on the floor last year. 103.2 this year, which is just an insane number. And then offensively as well, he's really affected his team's offense much more. And while Steph Castle has gotten better, they had Fox all year. He and Fox barely played together last year. They also had Harper. They just generally had more shooting. They weren't playing Sohan anymore. They had Harrison Barnes all year. So all those things did add to that increase. But I would say the biggest difference between last year and this year, all those on-court numbers, was Wembanyama just being a lot better.
And a couple of other numbers on this. So Wembanyama he upped his usage rate and improved his true shooting, which is something I really love for this. And the way that he did that was not by taking more threes or making more threes. He actually dropped his 3-point attempt rate, but he went from 11 twos per 36 to 14 twos per 36, which is a really high number. It's a high usage guy. But then the most important thing offensively for me with Wemby, 4.5 free throws per 36 to 8.7. And that really helped change things for the Spurs. And he also cut down on his turnovers without his assists decreasing too much. That was one of our big issues with Wemby's offense last year. And so I still had Wembanyama before the DVT happened. I still had him on my MVP ballot. And so that always gives me pause, because it's not like, oh, he went from second team or third team all NBA into being, we both had him second in most valuable player. He was higher than that before, but this is still a marked change. I mean, the fact that we could even consider him as a possibility for best player in the league, even if it was a partially foreseeable thing because we both believed in his potential, you still have to actually do it. And he actually did it.
Yeah, and then also he got better as the year went on as well. What he was doing offensively by the end of the year, especially against teams that didn't have someone specifically to defend him and our good plan, where he just is like putting up 40 in like easy in some of these games. And yeah, it would be, it's silly season, but there's a lot of guys who would be putting up 40 if they could in those games, and they can't do it. And so he did make my ballot. He was not my number one, because you did see the outlines of this, but playing in terms of skill, he also reduced his turnovers, didn't take as many threes off the dribble anymore, but still was taking enough threes that he was spreading the defense out plenty. And yeah, you mentioned that ability to get to the foul line, improving his efficiency there was massive, really improved his game as a roller to the basket, which he just wasn't doing enough of last year. So he and Mitch Johnson deserves a lot of credit for this, as well as getting him to do more of the things that lead to it. I think Victor's also just been better on defense this year in terms of being more aware, contesting more shots, deterring more shots, not just kind of getting caught out on the perimeter, and actually knowing that he could take one step and go get this guy's shot, which I just don't think he realized last year. And so he's had much more of a deterrent effect, particularly on guys' floaters, I think, is where guys are just terrified to even shoot a floater around him. Even though his blocks per 36 are down, the deterrent effect, I think, is way up. So yeah, he was unbelievable. And yeah, if you want to say last year, they were 8.7 points per 100 better when he was on the floor. He didn't really help their offense at all. They actually were better offensively when he was off the floor last year. And then this year, they're 17 points per 100 better when he's on the floor. So it's a great player becoming maybe the best player in the league, announcing himself. You have to really be focused on that. We can talk about Jalen Duren as well. He actually was my winner.
Mm.
And I think maybe he sealed that up as well with the way he played with Cade out at the end of the season. But make the case for Duren, and did you in fact have him as number one?
I did not have him as number one, but I did have him on my ballot. And Duren,
Who was number one? Have we gotten to him yet?
I've mentioned all five. Denny Avdija is my number one.
Okay.
And
Tiago Splitter doesn't agree with you, but that's okay. That's
Jalen
a joke,
Duren,
by the way. If you didn't listen to Friday's pod, I asked him about it, and he was like, "I don't really like talking about individual awards." I was like, "All right, fair enough."
And so Duren going from 16 usage to 24 while still being brutally efficient, that's a really hard task. He dropped all the way from 70% to 69%, which is fantastic. And did that in part by taking more twos from 10 per 36 to 14.6. So I talked about that number for Wembanyama. Jalen Duren actually takes more twos than Wemby. He doesn't take as many threes, of course. And then getting to the free throw line, he's almost a little bit under doubled his free throw attempt rate from 4.3 to 7.8. That also shows the increased role for Duren in the offense. And defensively, I thought he took some steps forward. I'm still not the biggest believer in Jalen Duren's defense, but he did take some real steps forward there. So he's absolutely deserving a ballot. I have no issue whatsoever with you having him number one. I preliminarily, though,
I'll talk a little bit more about why I did have a number one. Again, I mean, that 11.5 net rating when he was on the floor is pretty preposterous, and they actually are better defensively when he plays, which when having a backup like Isaiah Stewart, that's pretty impressive. Obviously, Paul Reed factors in that too, but also he really has a positive effect on their offense because he's just so ridiculously efficient and just generates so many shots. Great offensive rebounder, but he also puts those back in a way that some of these other great offensive rebounders don't do. So yeah, I mean, he went from not even remotely in the all-star conversation to you and I both agreeing that he is all NBA. That's a pretty damn good leap. We're not talking about the leap that say Evan Mobley made last year, which still was a huge leap, but Evan Mobley was a borderline all-star player and in the defensive player of the year conversation, whereas Duren was like, all right, I guess he's like an okay starter. Are they even better with him on the floor rather than Stewart?
I have again no problems with Jalen Duren's case being here, and I'll make the Avdija case now, and I'm sure
Yes.
you in his team is that Denny Avdija, his usage ramped up dramatically, 23% last year to 29 this year, and he only slightly dropped in efficiency despite his three-pointer evaporating this year, 36.5% a year ago, 31% this year, because Avdija took a ton of twos, got up to 11 per 36, and that free throw attempt rate going from 6.2 to 10.1. And Avdija I value the lift a lot, and I think that Avdija, in part because of the surrounding talent, and in larger part because of the available surrounding talent, because of all the talented offensive players, the ones they had were all hurt at largely the same time, that Avdija had to do a lot this year that he probably wouldn't have to normally, but that showed real improvement in his game. He was able to be that one-man band offensively in a way that I didn't believe that he could before. And Avdija's defense was unambiguously worse this year than it had been in the past. But when you consider the increased offensive role, I don't think he's a significantly worse defender in the sense of capability. And so Duren gets bonus points for being a better defender. But I think that Avdija's growth offensively, and I just think doing it on ball, there's a lot of value to what Duren's doing, to be sure. And the non-Cade games really did fortify his case, so I ended up with Duren second. But doing it on ball, showing that you have that juice to be the best player on a good team, which Jalen Duren only had to do in that stretch when Cade Cunningham was out, that means a lot to me.
Yeah, Avdija, his three-point shooting declining a little bit was a concern for me. Again, he certainly is a worthy candidate. Another guy who some people are like, well, if you'd been paying attention to what he was doing at the end of last year, he was already doing this. Like, okay. I mean, again, we've seen a lot of guys regress after silly season. Doing it on a real team makes a huge difference. And the free throw drawing, you can see that so much of that is technique. What he's doing as a finisher, the slow step stuff, all that is new and impressive. And then his passing too, where he's really upped his distribution by quite a bit. And he's, like you noted, the lift was very difficult. And in a lot of these games when they didn't have any shooting, what he was able to do, even so with his precision passing to keep them afloat offensively, was really impressive. Then another guy we had to consider here who went beyond was 2 for me. Nickeil Alexander-Walker was 3. And as his case grew throughout the season, I was like, but is he really reaching a high enough ceiling? And by the end of the season, the answer was yes, that he absolutely was. He had really improved so much. And not only did he improve, but he improved to the point where he was almost, I don't know that he would have made if you did an East All-Star team based on what everyone did throughout the entire season, would he be on it? Maybe not quite, but pretty close. And so at age 26, a little bit later too, I do give you a little bit of a benefit of the doubt, because you and I, that's the other thing we should consider. You and I don't really consider second-year players, except with the notable exception of Luka Doncic in 1920, because it was just so ridiculous for him to go to like a top 5 player in the league out of nowhere. I mean, obviously he had potential, but he wasn't, he was on a tanking Dallas team the previous year. So Alexander Walker, 2,500 minutes, and upped his 3-point percentage. He upped his self-created 3-pointers. He doubled that. He's taking 2.3 more 3-point attempts per 36 and making way more of them. He improved from 78% to 90% at the foul line. Usage 16 to 24. Total creation went from 24 to 33. True shooting from 58 to 61. So he's really just bombing threes in a way where he was mostly a spot up guy last year. He's taking more off the dribble, doing more ball handling. Hawks way better when he's on the floor. Still hasn't missed a beat defensively either. Also, even with the increased usage, really didn't increase his turnovers hardly at all. And yeah, he just is. His points per 36 went from 13.4 to 22.5. That's just these numbers are all quite insane. And yeah, he's probably been the second best player on the Hawks this year. So yeah, I had him in that group. And number 3. Did you actually think he wasn't even the best on his own team? You would have had Jalen Johnson ahead of him?
Correct. And it's a really close call. I mean, you could say that Nickeil Alexander-Walker, he had a larger shift because of what he was to what he is. But Jalen Johnson being able to take over as the primary initiator, going from 5 assists per 36 to 8 without a significant increase in turnovers. It did go up, but didn't go up that much. That is an important thing. And one of the shorthands for me is, did you work your way into the All-NBA conversation when you absolutely were not before? And Jalen Johnson did that. All 3 of the guys on my ballot did. Abdia, Duren, and Jalen Johnson. None of them had ever been on an All-NBA thing for me, and all of them are now. All of them were at least in consideration. And so I'm totally fine. I had Nickeil Alexander-Walker 4th. I actually had Wembanyama 5th, in part because I had him 4th in MVP last year before he went down. And that just, I understand why you would have him higher. It was just that for me, he was coming from a really strong place. But for Jalen Johnson, that increase in role, it also, something I consider as a tiebreaker between those two is I think that Johnson's improvement was more of the impetus for the Hawks' changes and success than Nickeil's, though honestly, they're 2 sides of the same coin. They all went together. It's so interesting to have teammates there. Johnson, another guy who did one of my favorite things of dramatically improved his usage rate, but also improved his true shooting. It only went up 1 point, but he went from 57% to 58%. Nickeil did that as well. But the other thing that was interesting for me with Jalen Johnson, and this is kind of over the course of the season as well, and I consider that it's funny because this is a little bit fuzzy, and it's just, you think about, well, it was within the season, is that there were points towards the end, though we had a cold April, where I thought I saw some growth from Jalen Johnson as a shooter. That definitely
did occur.
And so that's potentially significant too, because that thinks about, well, what is it, brings to the question of what is he on a good team, on a great team. And so, yeah, so I think that Johnson, that increase in his playmaking, and that being, to me, the larger impetus for the Trae Young deal. Now, you could argue Nikhil's ascendance made that an even better decision, and that it was a partial motivator as well. But for me, I mean, they're both very, very deserving. I have no problem with Nikhil being on a ballot. I would have no problem, honestly, with Nikhil being number one. That's how good his improvement was.
Yeah, so Johnson barely missed out for me, but yeah, I just thought that his game was kind of making improvements in all the same things that he was doing before. So it wasn't necessarily adding a specific new skill in the way that Alexander Walker did. But yeah, I'm not going to shit on his case. Like he was fantastic. Anyone else outside of that? Are you done with your top five now? Can I
Yes.
throw a few other guys out there that I really wanted to discuss? And I'll try to make it quick on these. Onyeka Okongwu, he solidified his shooting improvement at the end of last year and really became an awesome three-point shooter for a center. He's gotten better on the boards as well. One of your guys that you had as biggest surprise player for a while was Michael Porter Jr., and maybe he would have been in this mix for the actual award if he had played a full season with the Nets. But we've talked plenty about how he improved his usage as well. He kind of, once he was still in Brooklyn after the trade deadline, I think maybe some of the fight went out of him a little bit.
Well, Nate, we'll talk about him a little bit more, because we'll talk. I think it'll be a more brief conversation. I have Porter Jr., who is ineligible for most improved. I have him second for biggest surprise player, and I'll explain the difference between the two when we get there.
Yeah. Tyrese Maxey had a real bounce back season. Now, he'd kind of been at this level before. I think he still had his best year. Neemias Queta did play quite a bit and last year, and just, no one ever thought of him as a starter. Now he's going to have a chance maybe to get paid at close to starter money. Brandon Miller only played 27 games last year and was taking a ton of threes, but didn't hit nearly as many of them, and just wasn't a serious player. Got to the foul line a little bit more this year too. So he took a nice step forward in his third year. Diabate, you already mentioned as well. He had someone that maybe we should have paid a little more attention to down the end of last year, but emerged into being a quality starter. I think Cade Cunningham actually was a lot better this season as well. More subtle increases, I would say, but he just did everything at a slightly better level than he had been before. He cut his turnovers, which was one of the biggest things that was really hurting him. Got better as a steals guy, and the passing creation went from 19 up to 22. So that was a pretty big improvement for him. EPM went from 2.9 to 4.9. Max Christie solidified his shooting improvement from a year ago. Guy I think would never get talked about in this was Jamal Murray. A few things that stood out to me for him.
Sure.
39% from three up to 43, while nearly doubling his self-created threes per 36, went from 2.7 to 4.3. So taking a lot more threes off the dribble and shooting the threes way more efficiently. Also, he increased his free throw attempt rate by about 50%. And then the fact that he was finally able to lead this offense without Nikola Jokic for the first time. I thought he also had by far his best distributing season, went from 12% passing creation up to 16.5. So he was really and we did a film breakdown of some of the passes he was throwing in the absence of Jokic was really high level of stuff. So he's made himself into, I would say, a real point guard. He was always in our point guard rankings, and he worked well with Jokic, and that was a big part of his value. But I think for the first time, you can say, no, this guy could play point guard with or without Nikola Jokic and be really effective.
Absolutely deserving. And another guy who was on my All-NBA ballot for the first time ever. So he deserves that. I'll throw a couple others out briefly. This bleeds into biggest surprise player, but I'll mention a couple more. If he had played more, Keontae George would have been a serious contender for this for me. And Keontae George, it also fits the kind of the side criteria for me, which is, did your play change something for your team material? And for me, Keontae George, his ascendance is a big part of what led to them trading for Jaren Jackson Jr., because they had their guy. And so Keontae George going from 54% true shooting to 61%, increasing his offensive role, getting to the free throw line a lot more. We've done a number of breakdowns of Keontae George on the year. So it blends because he was ineligible for most improved, but his improvement was so important.
Yeah, went from 24 to 28 usage and improved his true shooting from 54 to 61. And he was able to be much better as a foul jar, too. That was a huge thing that really improved for him. He increased his foul rate by over 50%, and it really affected the Jazz offense positively for the first time, especially on a tanking team, for their offensive rating with him on the floor to go up by 5 points was impressive. And yeah, if he hadn't been shut down by the end, maybe you could have been in the mix for everything. LaMelo Ball surely has to be in this conversation as well. I mean, not in the conversation to win it, but just wanted to shout out his improvement, and the Hornets weren't playing a real team around him, but his ability to fit into being on a real team, stop taking so many ridiculous shots. Although he actually took just as many threes this year as last year, but he made 37% instead of 34%. Marcus Smart, nice bounce back year for him at 32. Maybe you could just say it was the injuries. GG Jackson, at least, wasn't a complete tire fire offensively this year the way it was last year. Ryan Rollins ascending into being a starting point guard was exciting. Jaylen Brown, look, some of these statistical increases on Jaylen Brown. You want to take this one?
Yeah, so Jaylen Brown, not because he's not an up and coming player, wasn't eligible. Like, I wouldn't consider him eligible. I had him more in the bigger surprise area, but Jaylen Brown had this really rough season, and in 24-25, his 2-point efficiency really dropped, and then his three ball was worse too. So last year, Jaylen Brown, 56% true shooting on 29 usage. This year, 57, so an improvement there, on 36 usage, which is incredible. That's a massive jump for him. Going into the MVP ballot conversation, we had a little bit of a disagreement on him. That is a huge thing, but his and there's the argument about, well, his year-to-year improvement is less relevant because he was below his usual standard last year, but he was going from age 28 to age 29. There was no certainty that the injury was the story, that he was going to bounce all the way back, and he
was still above where he was even in previous years. This year, I would say.
I wholeheartedly agree, especially when you consider what he had to do offensively due to the shorthanded nature of the team, with Jason Tatum missing almost the whole year. I'll throw a couple of small guys out there, and again, this bleeds with biggest surprise. Not as impactful, but guys that I want to mention: Peyton Watson with the Nuggets, doing it partially without Jokic, but also partially with him. I was really impressed by him, moved him up. Colin Gillespie, who, actually his per minute numbers aren't that different from last year, but Colin Gillespie only played 461 minutes last year. And then this year he started a majority of the games for the Suns, over 2,200 minutes, and was an important part of their success. And then the last guy, because at one point in his career, he was one of the least successful guys who was both a Nate's guy and a Danny's guy, Dominic Barlow, establishing himself as we talked about it in the young guys, Reggie, but as a starter on a team, but maybe not a starter on every team, but just working that way to being somebody who was a journeyman who had already been cut from two ways, different places, to starting consistently on a team that ended up being 7th in the conference. That's a huge improvement.
No, it was great to see him finally find it. A couple other guys who really improved this year that I think people like maybe not eligible for the award where they are at this point in their career. Kawhi Leonard is one of those.
Yep.
And remember, last year he missed basically the first half of the season, but some of the stuff that he was doing, the biggest thing that I think stands out: 3.7 free throw attempts per 36 last year, 7.2 this year. And I was reminded as I looked at that stat of something that Kevin Durant told me when he was asked, maybe I asked him, I can't remember, why his free throw rate had gone down so much with the Warriors. And he basically said, well, I'm not getting as much touch time, and I'm not as much of a number one option in terms of creator. And what he said is, when you're going to have the ball so many times, you can kind of almost throw away reps trying to draw fouls. because you just have a number of chances and you're playing this cat and mouse game over the course of a game where you're trying to use drawing fouls as a constraint. And so Leonard getting the ball so much more this year, that really, I think, without James Harden for a lot of the year, that really helped him up his free throw rate. He obviously shot way better. He didn't shoot as high of a percentage from three, but he really upped his 3-point attempt rate as well to the highest of his career. And over half, this is another thing, 2.3 self-created threes last year, 4.1 this year per 36. And hey, metronome again, 120.5 offensive rating when he's on the floor for the Clippers. Doesn't matter who's around him. It's just going to be 120 every single year when he's on the floor. It never fails.
Yeah, I had Kawhi pretty high in my biggest surprise player rankings for that exact reason. I want to throw one other guy out there. So we also we don't include second year players unless they're Luka Doncic. But also because I kind of forget that he's a second-year player, which is Dennis Jenkins. Because Dennis Jenkins going from being, you had him as sixth man of the year, I had him as second, where he played, Dennis Jenkins last year played, I just want to make sure I get it right, 23 NBA minutes last year to go to this role. That is
way more minutes in Summer League than he played in the NBA last year.
And so I have him higher in biggest surprise player because I generally don't consider them available. And I because we could talk about some of the improvements within that. Since I already teased that I have Michael Porter Jr. there, I'll explain that. But my number one is also ineligible for most improved player. And so we might as well actually start there. And that's Con Knippel. Because Con Knippel being this early in his career and the potential importance of that, a lot of the guys that we had for most improved, Abdia, Wembanyama, Jalen Duren, there was an optimistic way that you could see this. And I liked Con Knippel more than I think a lot of draft people did. I don't consume a ton of that content because I don't want to spoil my own work. And then there's just not that much time between when we get a guy and the process. But Con Knippel setting the rookie record for three-pointers, being the first rookie ever to do it in the NBA, and being a positive defensive player, being a positive player overall on one of the league's most surprising teams, that is a bigger difference for me than somebody like Avi or Jalen Johnson relative to my own expectations.
All right, well, we'll get it more into our surprises and disappointments at a later point, but over 2.5 hours of recording is probably enough. I've already probably started saying the word probably way more than I probably should, and that's a indication that I should pack it in. And we'll be back tomorrow. We of course have to talk about the play-in games and the playoff series that are already set. We got a lot of work to do this week, and we are really looking forward to it. We'll also have some news on what we're going to be doing for our live coverage in these playoffs as well. There's a new platform with the unfortunate demise of playback, but hopefully one that you all will really enjoy. So we'll tell you more about that in a little bit. Thanks so much for listening.